Hello and welcome to Craft Informs Design, a conversation with Peter Speliopoulos and Paul Andrew. I'm Lancy from the KINDCRAFT. I'm moderating this conversation for the International Folk Art Market's virtual One World event. We will be talking about the importance of folk art and how craft has informed your design processes throughout your careers. So Peter Speliopoulos is a multidisciplinary artist working with ceramics and home objects for the new Peter Speliopoulos Project, which is based in New York. His influences are found in his experience as a fashion designer, a creative director, and a costume designer for opera and dance. Paul Andrew is an English fashion designer who's designed along iconic fashion designers before launching the Paul Andrew footwear line. He is now the creative director at Salvatore Ferragamo and lives between Florence, Italy and New York City. Welcome, guys.
Hi. So good to see you. Hi, Paul.
Yeah. Hi, Peter. Great to see you.
Welcome. So nice to be with you guys today. So I understand you guys have been friends for a long time, right? So tell me about this long-standing relationship. You met at Donna Karan, right?
Yes. Well, I was creative director of Donna Karan, and we were desperate to find a great talent to do the shoe collection. And fortunately, someone put Paul into my hands, and really it was the birth of an amazing professional relationship, which then grew into an amazing friendship that we've shared for a long time, I guess. When did you actually join us?
It was back in 2003. I was working with Calvin Klein, and he had just retired, and he was so kind as to put me in touch with Donna. And that's when I met you the first time. I can't believe it was all those years ago.
I know, it's incredible. We've been through so many adventures together. And I think that that's why our professional design relationship grew into such a great friendship, because Paul was really working a lot in Italy even then, making shoes, and we traveled quite a bit. I mean, I'll never forget when you took me to those Formi Feet shows and heel development places, which for me was so exciting, because going to the Veneto and working with those craftsmen really was one of the highlights, and one of the things that brought me so much understanding about what it takes to make shoes and how important those artisans are to the end result.
No, it's true. It's and we had so many incredible experiences in Italy. I mean, I think you came at least twice a year to work with me in the shoe factories. And it was such a great privilege to work with you in those heel makers and last makers and watch the pattern cutters create and craft the shoes themselves. And I think you're right, that totally garnered this interest, for me at least, in the beauty of the handmade and the handcraft.
I remember that we did a collection, and the shoes were inspired by Paul Chambost, who happens to have been a famous French ceramic artist. And I really think there's an interesting intersection between making shoes and ceramic arts. I'm sure you'll be a great ceramic artist yourself someday.
It's definitely on my list of things to do. I never told you this, but Siddhartha, my partner of almost 20 years, bought me a Paul Chambost for my birthday a few years ago.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous. That's fabulous. So you're living with the inspiration itself.
Exactly.
But I think through all of those years, and also working at Donna Karan, and Donna, I have to say, is one of the first people who has really embraced true folk art and the experience of craft, I think, in her design, one of the first. Because even before, my time, or in the time before I worked together with Paul, she was already working with print designers, Carolyn Quartermain, who literally created scripts almost for the fabrics that we were using. And of course, later Donna got involved with Haiti. I think that just through osmosis, my experience of folk art and my appreciation for craft, which Paul also shared, gave us an early entree into something that I think was way ahead of time.
No, absolutely.
And yeah.
So many meetings where she come into the shoe design studio with incredible handcrafted objects from her travels that were to inspire us for the season.
And then at some point I got involved with the International Folk Art Market. I've been on the board for, well, I was on the board for 6 years and now I'm an advisory board member. And I understood that Paul was so passionate also about arts and crafts. And so I invited him to join me at the Folk Art Market. And we've been going ever since. I mean, it's become kind of an annual tradition that me, Paul, and a group of friends from different arts fields, museum curators, all sort of meet up in Santa Fe. And we really are all very serious. And we shop the market passionately and independently because we're also sort of competitive. And we all want to get the best things. So we like break out after the initial moment. Only to reconvene at the end of the day with margaritas and all of our bounty and sort of a show and tell about what we've seen and who we've met and which artists we love and what we discovered this time. So,
Peter, I think I'm gonna stick by your side next time at the Folk Art Market.
Well, everyone who has joined us has never been disappointed, I can tell you.
I'm sure.
But it's grueling. It's grueling. We're there at 7:30 in the morning till it closes, and we go every day because, you know, every day it's a different experience and a different discovery. And you get more and more familiar, and you trace your pattern through the market, and then we do reveal our finds, and we do excite each other with our discoveries. So there's more to acquire after that.
That sounds amazing. It sounds amazing. So tell me how you both are doing today. So Paul, you're in Italy, and Peter's in New York. I'm in Los Angeles. So, you know, obviously the world has changed a lot in these last few months. How are you doing, and what have you been thinking about during quarantine, and how has COVID shifted your perspective?
Well, for me as the creative director of a brand in fashion, it has given me a great moment of pause to reflect on how we were doing things, how the fashion industry was broken and has been for many years, and how this should be taken as a great opportunity to fix that. And over the course of the many months that we were in lockdown, I was definitively still working with my teams every day remotely. But it then struck me that we don't need as much product as we've been trying to produce the last many years. I mean, there's not a consumer desire for 4 seasons of fashion and just all of that stuff. So I initiated this thought, which I then had to speak with my executive team within the company, that we should be segueing into more of a 2-season delivery per year, and then breaking that out with product that is completely relevant for the season that it's delivering in. Because that was another issue with fashion, that we were delivering winter product in the height of summer and summer product in the height of winter, and it was just sitting on the shelves not being purchased for many weeks and months. So that's sort of where my mind has been going, and also thinking about different ways of presenting the collections during Fashion Week and presentations. So it's actually been a really creative moment for me, and really excited to unveil what is in store next season come September.
Wonderful.
I think it's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah, because I don't think it's just, I mean, it's not really revealed what people are doing yet, what other designers are doing, but I do get the sense from my friends and in the industry that people are definitely taking a new approach. So I think it's had a massive impact on the way that designers and businesses will function going forward.
Right.
And what have you been thinking about, Peter?
Well, you know, I'm actually at my country house in the Hudson Valley. I'm not in New York City. And I think that with all due respect to the hardships that people have been suffering, and I do think it's been a hugely tragic time for so many people, and I have a lot of empathy for that. For me, like Paul, it's been a very creative time. I think that for me, because as a ceramic artist, I've largely been working in isolation in recent times anyway. It hasn't been a shock. What I did do, though, is I installed a studio at my country house. So I've been able to work and create in a very free way. And that's been extremely positive for me. And I think that being in nature has really underscored for me a huge understanding of the value of nature and the value of nature in design. And so I've been thinking a lot about like Frank Lloyd Wright and how he integrated nature into his architecture. And I feel that this time is very much a renaissance in a way of the arts and crafts movement, which was a reaction to you know, the Industrial Revolution and mass-produced things. And I think that it speaks to me now very much like what this conversation is about, the importance of the handmade, the importance of craft in our lives, and the fact that now we're all at home, we're all isolated, we're living at home, we're seeing our homes, our refuges, our sanctuaries in a new light. I think it's going to be very positive for the world of interiors, for the world of craft and design of objects, because I think we're seeing that we want to live in beautiful environments. We want to live with singular objects. We want things that speak to us, that have soul. And so for me, being upstate and in nature has brought that more to the forefront than I've ever thought about before.
Yeah, and I think this is really important to all of us, especially the three of us. I wanted to touch on what you were talking about, Paul. I mean, obviously, artisanship is very important to the making of luxury products. So how can the industry support these artisans in times of economic crisis?
Well, interestingly, at Ferragamo, it's always been about the handcraft. And since I became involved with the company 4 years ago, I put massive emphasis on bringing back so many of those traditions, that some of which have been lost, whether it be the way that things are made, but also the raw materials themselves. I mean, Salvatore Ferragamo was such a genius in footwear design, and during his career, he worked through the Second World War. In a moment where you couldn't get leather because there was no meat, you couldn't get the metal that he needed to create the shanks inside the arch of the shoe. And so instead of saying, okay, I just can't work, he started investigating local artisanal materials to incorporate into his designs. Like, he was the first designer to ever use a cork wedge. He was the first designer to ever to weave raffia to create a shoe. He found fishing wire from the local fishermen on the Tuscan coast and created the first shoe with like an invisible shoe with fishing wire. I mean, he's absolutely a genius.
Amazing.
And so I sort of tried to find these organic materials that are local and artisanal makers that can sort of bring back that tradition. And we've been reweaving shoe uppers and remaking bags and developing textiles for the ready-to-wear. Even developed a new kind of silk for our scarves that was made from orange fibers, that's broken down orange fibers. So I'm very engaged in bringing back that artisanship to Ferragamo. And our clients are even very excited about that. When we deliver a certain product into the store that is, of course, limited edition because of its artisanal quality, they sell out almost immediately because people have, I'm finding such an appreciation today of the handmade, even from a luxury designer brand like Ferragamo.
Mm-hmm. And so you've been able to keep the artisans working even through COVID. I mean, I'm sure there was a short period of shutdown, but you know, we see so many reports about you know, people that are out of work, particularly garment workers and artisans around the world. Have you been able to, or I mean, not just for you, I mean, just generally, how can we support artisans during this time?
Well, there were many weeks where we couldn't work with anyone. That there were certain craftsmen who were working from their homes and their local studios alone. There was this one woman who lives like on the top of some hill in Tuscany who makes these Rochelle knitwear pieces, which are incredible, like all hand knitted. And she was able to continue, but there were many weeks where we were locked down, but we're definitely making up for lost time now. Italy, thankfully, has been open for the last month and a half, I would say. And we're really re-engaging them in a big way.
Great, great. Peter, any thoughts on
I mean,
this?
well, I think that, you know, what Paul is doing and speaking to is incredibly important. And yes, the public does recognize it. And I think that while maybe a lot of this takes place in the luxury sector, it does trickle down. And I think young people are very, very interested, and eventually they come to accept it because they've been exposed to it, and the whole market shifts. It takes time, but I think it's incredibly important to create these kinds of products in the way that Paul is talking about. But I also think like other brands like Loewe or Prada are working in similar ways and supporting craft in other ways too. For example, Loewe, which is a Spanish brand owned by Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, does this Loewe Craft Prize, which I don't know if the general public is aware of, but I think it's incredibly important because, you know, they are awarding an annual prize to what they consider to be the most interesting development in the craft world, in the contemporary craft world. And these are very high level skilled artisans, but working in many different media, whether it's glass or basketry or ceramics. And I think this idea of prizes and contests is incredibly important and valuable because it's only through that that the public can get exposed to what's really happening in the world of contemporary crafts. And, you know, craft is also going through, and I'm sure you know about this more than perhaps even I do, craft is going through its own renaissance, through its own new definition, because I think these craftsmen, these artisans, are about taking craft to a whole new level. It's different from folk art. It's different from the traditions of folk art. It's really about incredible expertise in a specific area. And I think design of objects now, and design of furniture, and design of carpets, and design of everything is being taken to a new level. And through these contests or prizes, we can learn a lot more about what's happening in the world. And of course, I think big brands can get more involved. They can work with artisans in the folk art market to develop product, even product at a better price. It doesn't just have to be on the elite luxury level. All of this, I think, is very important in these times and in the times that are coming in the future, to underscore the values that we think are the new design values.
Yeah, and you guys are both great examples of designers who work with artisans. You know, Paul, obviously for your work, as you mentioned, being a footwear designer, working for Ferragamo, craft is really important to your process. So can you talk a little bit about this, the initial enthusiasm for craft?
Sure. I think that, I mean, it goes back a long way for me because it's sort of always been in my family, because my father was the upholsterer to the Queen of England, and I actually lived in his workshop in the castle, basically, for my whole childhood. So, you know, I would come home from school and do my homework watching him hand reupholster all of these incredible antique furniture pieces using tools and needles and yarn that I had never seen before, and I've never seen since, actually, because it's important for the Queen that things be maintained and upholstered in the traditional way that they were originally made. So that has definitely always been, I've been conscious of that my whole life. Meanwhile, my mother was an executive at a computer company. So on the other side, I had this appreciation for technology and innovation. So it's interesting how throughout this sort of span of my career, I've always tried to integrate this idea of high craft and high tech at the same time. So, you know, when I'm, you know, there may be a shoe upper that is completely hand woven using organic yarn, or but the heel on it is sent to a car factory and galvanized in the same way that an Italian sports car might be. So I'm kind of also interested right now in this sort of juxtaposition and contrast of craft and tech. But you know, this is why craft has always been important to me and in my life.
Wonderful. So
I think it's
Peter,
interesting that for so many of us, for so many creative people, we have these childhood experiences, because I'm of Greek descent, and I remember so much, like my grandmothers embroidering traditional Greek embroideries, even though they were already living in America. They came over like around 1915. They brought those traditions from the old world, from the old country. And somehow that sticks with you. I think you don't know where it is, but subliminally it's living in your imagination, or it's living in your curiosity. And many, I think, creative people bring out that that secret history sort of in their lives.
Mm-hmm. So actually, it's quite interesting, your trajectory, because you know, fashion designer, creative director, and you know, now your focus is on pottery and of course home goods as well that incorporate textiles. But can you talk a little bit about that shift from fiber to clay?
Well, I guess I've gone in reverse direction. Now I'm a maker, which is so great. And I think it's sort of right for the times too. But, you know, I was a career fashion designer and creative director. I always loved fabrics, and I always loved embroideries. So the connection is materiality for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that I've always loved surfaces. Even when I was a child, I wanted to be an architect. And I think that it was really about materials. As a creative director and fashion designer, I also loved this irony of natural things with technical advancements. And I think that became a real theme in my work. But for me, the connection between my experience in fashion and my experience as a ceramicist is ironically skins, because I think that fabric is kind of the skin we wear as humans. And for me, vessels, you know, the skin of the vessel is the surface that I'm kind of creating. So I work a lot on textures and glazes that I like to think of as mysterious skins, and that evoke some kind of secret history within the vessel. And even my home objects collection is all about skins, because I'm working really in leathers and suedes and shearling. And so for me, that's the connection. And I had been working very informally, casually during my summer vacations when I was working at Donna Karan, with a local potter in Patmos, Greece, where I have a house. And it was when Donna Karan closed that I decided to study more formally ceramics and understood that that was my path. And yeah, I guess that's sort of the idea behind it. It's been very, very exciting for me. I still love fashion. I still love clothes. But I think that now, for me, the interior environment and how we live with objects and like what I was talking about earlier is more my direct connection, and my expression is comfortable in that area now.
Beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about the folk art market and the experiences that you've had there, the artisans you've met, the objects that you've collected there. What resonates with you? I know it's deep, right? But tell us about like that experience of meeting the artisans and finding objects that resonate with you, and what's special about it.
Well, Paul has this fabulous display in back of him of the most amazing objects from Michoacan, so we can start there.
I don't even know where to begin, but I guess that is a good place. I mean, I have bought and appreciated so many pieces from the market over the years, and it's interesting how you sort of garner relationships with these people, these artisans, because many of them have returned year after year, and each of them has their own incredible stories. And part of what I love about the market is that you're appreciating and discovering these folk art pieces, but they always have a translator standing next to the artist. So even if they don't speak English, you can communicate with them in their language and hear their story. I mean, I'm thinking about these ceramic heads by Jose Garcia Antonio, I believe his name is, who, I mean, that's an incredible story. He turned blind, and now the only thing he can sort of remember, as far as I can understand, is the face of his wife. So he creates all of these flower pots that are the face of his wife, and they always have this beautiful mole on like the top of the forehead, which she has. And the last time I was at the market, she was sitting there next to him, and it's kind of wonderful to see her. But I mean, I've bought so many things over the years. I mean, what are some of your favorites, Peter?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm so jealous that you have those heads, because I have wanted them forever. And I think that that artist was at the market since the first year, I think since 2004, because he's really considered like a national treasure of Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. And I've always resisted buying them because I thought, oh my God, how am I going to transport them? How am I going to get them to New York? How am I going to live with these? And here you are living with them in Florence, Italy. You've taken them transatlantic. And that is just so, that's just so fabulous. But also those candelabras, or those pieces in back of you, are from the great Michoacan artist. And you have those Rwanda baskets. That story is so fabulous. Why don't you tell us about that?
The Gehana Links, I think their name is, right? The organization.
Yes.
Gahaya
or something.
Oh, sorry for the mispronunciation, but it's an incredible story, that one. The organization was born after the war in Rwanda between the Hutu and the Tutsi tribes. And essentially, from what I understand, all the men were gone, all of the fathers, the wives, the eldest sons. And so these women came together out of need, and established that they all had this common talent for weaving this particular type of basket. And they started small with these smaller organic shapes, but this past year I bought 9 of these pieces, that some of which are 7 feet tall. They are so magnificent, and they're all in these natural organic earth tones. Some of them are like an ivory and a dark sort of black color. Others that have this sort of rusty color with a dark brown. And I really, really wanted to ship them to my apartment here in Florence, but they went through customs and then they went right back to America. So I couldn't.
Oh no.
But I think what's so great is that you have them.
Yeah, and I'm so happy. There's some in New York and there's some in the living room in my house in Connecticut.
So you
these 9. Are an example. What's that?
I was just going to say you bought 9, right? So, and I know that you're very careful about your collection. I'm sure it's very curated. So, I mean,
what's so great about those pieces? What's so great about those pieces too is, you know, I think Paul's talking about this tradition in Rwanda, and now like 4,000 women are involved in creating these baskets, which are no longer really baskets. I mean, what Paul acquired are like, I think, monumental, innovative art forms. And I think part of what the market, the international folk art market has fostered is this innovation. And many of these artists are working in the traditions, but taking it to a whole nother level. And I mean, when I saw those baskets, I just couldn't believe how spectacular they were. So I'm just so excited that you have them.
Well, you should have seen me trying to get them to the UPS stand. It was really...
So I have
a different...
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I have a different experience also, because as I'm on the board, I'm also a juror who works with a group of people, including Keith Recker, who's the creative director of the International Folk Art Market, and Judy Espinar, who is one of the founders of the market and one of my dearest old friends, and a group of, I would say, scholars, experts from different regions, Africa, Latin America, India, South Asia. And so together, we put together who are the artists going to be that we accept for the impending year. And what's exciting about that is the opportunity to, of course, cultivate the best of the best, cultivate a market that's based on the best of the best. You know, it's important that the market is well merchandised. We want to have democratic pricing. We want to have a broad appeal of product from many different people coming from now, I think, I don't know, there's 20,000 people who come through the market now in 3 days. 60%, I think, are now from out of state, out of New Mexico. So that means that we're talking to a much bigger audience. And so I get to see what's coming in a way. And yet I find for myself that I always return to the same people or to the same artists or to the same traditions. It's not to say that I don't know, every year there aren't outliers. And I think, you know, one year I might discover a Zapotec carpet by Porfirio Gutierrez, who I love so much. But mainly I always buy the same things. For example, this jacket that I'm wearing is from Samporn in Thailand. And every year I buy something, because everything's hand woven. Everything is sort of dyed indigo. And I mean, imagine spending a life just dyeing shades of indigo. To me, that is like the closest approach to heaven on earth we're going to get. And so, you know, I love the textiles. I love the finishes, you know. So there's always something new to return to buy. And I know that Paul and I always race to the booth of Pedro Meza, who is working in the Mayan tradition of weaving. I mean, these are like thousands of year old traditions that he's working into home furnishings and also huipiles. And they're so gorgeous. And I love them because they interface with sort of the Greek embroideries that I have in Patmos. And then, you know, I always go and buy these Iban pieces that are made on backstrap looms. They're ikats from Borneo. that are really like museum quality. So I think at the market you can find everything from the highest level. I mean, there are collectors buying museum quality things there, or you can really buy things for $10 and $20 that have the same value to me. They are like what Paul talks about. They're about the stories that you exchange with the artists. They're about preserving the cultural traditions of these countries. And for me, it's nice to have the opportunity to live with these things. It's nice to be able to collect Suzanis. I'm a big collector and I'm a big believer in collecting. And I think that it's always nice to have more than one of anything. And I really believe like when you see it, you have to work on impulse. You have to grab it because, you know, nothing is ever the same and things move in and out of experience very quickly. You know, at the market, there are things that I've collected, like those bags from Bolivia that are made from this fiber of a plant that a couple of times, you know, they've had like a blight. So then all of a sudden those bags are not available anymore. Or maybe some artisans have things going on in their countries that we sense that the quality has gone down. And so we don't have them that year, because it's really important to us that we are bringing in artists who are working on the highest level that they can. And now, of course, we have such a great audience who has learned so much and who appreciates so much the best of the best. So I think grab it when you see it. That's my philosophy at the market and in everything in life.
In life, in general.
It's like vintage clothes, right? And vintage shoes. When we've gone to all of these vintage markets, it's like you better grab it because you don't really know if you're ever going to see it again. And things are disappearing every day, not just languages and folk art traditions, but I mean like everything. So
yeah, these are very, very rare, very special things that are made with such intention, right? So I think, you know, you've really demonstrated why folk art is important. Can you each tell us how folk art has informed your design processes?
It's informed me a lot, I have to say. I think going to the market for the last many years and purchasing so many things and bringing them back to New York, it's been interesting trying to incorporate those sort of elements into the modern houses that I had built. But I have to say that when I moved to Florence, I only moved into this apartment at the end of 2019, and I shipped a lot of folk art here. So I sort of built this space around those objects. So in terms of the way that I live and the interior decoration, that's informed me and become so important to the way that I'm living. And then in terms of the way that I work, I find so many of those elements quite inspiring for the materials that I'm developing. I mean, there might be a certain finishing on a ceramic that I think could be so gorgeous to translate into leather. There may be a certain weave that I see that I think, wow, that could be so interesting to, not to replicate, because I don't think that is appropriate at all, but that inspires you to look for that sort of yarn in the current fabric fairs. But moreover, it's about an appreciation for the handmade. And I've been pushing that, as I was saying before, so heavily for Ferragamo in the last couple of years, and a real return to doing things in an artisanal way and in a local way. You know, Ferragamo has really been so supportive that, you know, we don't make anything outside of Italy. There's so many luxury brands that, I mean, they could never say that. They are producing things across Europe, in China, all across Asia, in fact. But, you know, Ferragamo is devoted to Italy and the handmade in this country.
That's wonderful. Really very special.
it is exceptional. It's exceptional. Amazing.
So for your creative process, how has folk art influenced it?
Well, I think everything that Paul said, I totally agree with. And of course, I was experiencing more when I was working actively in the fashion industry. And, you know, now with my home objects collection, those pieces are all made in Italy in a very small atelier there, who believes very much in handcraft, and my objects are all handcrafted. They're handmade in leather, they're all hand stained. And I think that basically what resonates with me about folk art and what I try to imbue in my own work is a sense of soul, because all of those objects coming from the folk art market, or coming from folk artists, and even coming from contemporary craftspeople, speak to, I think, the soul. They really do. They have history behind them. They have stories. Like I said earlier, I've always loved embroideries, and I've used embroideries in all of my fashion work, and I do a little bit of that now too. And I think that every stitch really does tell a story, and a lot of those pieces were created in traditions that have been handed down by families, that have been pieces that have been embroidered in dowries. They do have a place in the communities from where they came, and they are to be respected and honored. And I think that the more we learn about that, the more we feel comfortable to put a little bit of that into our work as artists and designers. And I think the customer, the people who are buying these things, and it's critical that they buy them. It's critical that they understand the difference. It's critical that they understand that perhaps these are more expensive, because all of that is in those pieces. They are made by hand, but they also come with a link to the past, and I think that is of great value. Then, as Paul said, you know, color is important. How do you create that range of indigos? How do you create that finish? How is indigo different in Mali from Japan? It's great to enrich yourself as a creative person, I think, through the understanding of the history of creation itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I agree with you, and you say it so well about the sense of having a soul in an object, something being alive. One of the things that I respect the most about these traditions is that they're inherently sustainable, in the sense that they're usually made with natural materials, and in a tradition that's respectful to Mother Nature. And at a time where fashion is really grappling with sustainability, what do you think that the fashion industry can learn from our global artisans?
Well, I can only speak to designer, but it's you know, so many of the artists that we meet at the folk art market, they're of course using materials and elements that are local, and that is something that has been quite important for me. And it's really the way that the Ferragamo business was built. It's a way that our founding designer created. So I'm very interested in going back to using much more organic, sustainable, local materials and local artisans. And that's really the major focus for us right now. I mean, I have even given the mandate to my design team, and I will say that it is very complicated to get to this point, but you know, I really wanted 25% of the raw materials, at least, that we use to be sustainably sourced by 2021. We're constantly prototyping and trialing different materials that are being developed. I mean, one thing is there's a leather that's being grown from mushrooms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was talking about this orange fiber textile that became like a new sort of silk in the collection. I also helped develop this sort of a new sort of jersey fabrication that is actually developed from water bottles that they pull out of the ocean, and then they organically break down. And You know, it's Julianne Moore actually wore a dress that I made from that fabrication to the Green Carpet Awards in Milan last year, and we won an award at Ferragamo for our efforts in sustainability. So, I mean, the folk art market and those artisans have really made me inspired to do more of that, I think.
Wonderful.
I mean, I think that there is such an important movement towards sustainability that it is going to affect every product category in the world, because this is our world, this is our planet. And I think inherently in the folk artists, they understand that this is the world we live in. This is where we live, because what they create is a response and a reflection of their community. And I think there's a very valuable lesson in that, because I'm not saying that everything is impossible, because I think technology tells us that so much is possible, and there are so many brilliant minds. And for the fashion and fabric industry to all of a sudden work in a new cycle, or to work with these technical advancements that sustainability requires, is a whole new area that is full of amazing opportunities, but also a lot of difficulties. I can really not speak to that because I don't know it necessarily, but I think that what the folk art market or the folk artists talk to us about is the fact that while everything is possible, there's a big myth there, I think, because what I love about these folk artists is they're working with what they know. They're working with traditions that have been part of their lives, part of their histories for sometimes thousands of years. And they've been able to even reinvent within the parameters of what is, as Paul was saying, local. I mean, like, they have those fibers, and they have those plants, and they have that earth, and they have that water, and all of those conditions are really what has fostered the unique beauty of what they create. And I think that there's a big message in that, because I think the fashion industry and all of us have gotten lost in more, and make more stuff, and we can do this, and we can do it like that, and we can be interpreting this or that. But ultimately now, I think it's time for designers to really just think about, like, from the heart, what it is that they can do with what they've got. I mean, the opportunities, the possibilities are limitless. And I see that even now working as a ceramic artist, because I'm working with clay and my ideas, and of course, glazes. But I mean, so much invention can come out of a very narrow recipe of possibility. And I think there's a really important message in that. And I think we really have to honor and respect what has come before us and what will come next. And unless we do work in sustainable ways, there will be not the future that we all hope to engage and create in. So I think that for me is the overall message that comes from these artists. And I do think people are really working, big companies are working very hard to interpret that message. Don't you think, Paul? I mean, everyone is trying to now reduce this carbon footprint and all the stuff and all the ersatz crap out there.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Ferragamo recently signed an agreement with the Fashion Pact with several major fashion brands to show their allegiance to sustainability and moving forward in a much more healthy way for the environment. And we have signed on to say that we are going to do a certain percentage of our work sustainably, so we have to now do that. And but it's not just Ferragamo; there are many other brands involved, and that's very exciting. I think and it's not just about the products themselves. Think about the packaging and the logistics and the shipping costs and all the fuel that's required. I mean, all of those things can be studied to be reduced. I mean, now all of our packaging is recycled. There's nothing that we do that's not recycled. And even going into big board meetings with 30 people at a desk, there's nothing printed anymore. Everything is digitalized. So I think that we're definitely moving in the right direction, even if I think that there is so much more that can be done and it's not moving fast enough.
Well, we work, you know, we work in the world of dreams. I mean, I think that's so extraordinary for all of us who are creators and makers and designers and folk artists and craftsmen. We really are taking something from the inside and I think spinning kind of dreams. And I think that those dreams are limitless. And so I do think the message is working with less can actually foster more. And I think that what's exciting about young people who, you know, haven't been exposed to things that I have been exposed to are coming into this world with a whole new set of expectations and new kinds of dreams or new interpretations of what the dreams have been that can become something for the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've said it so well, and I thank you both for your words and your intentions of doing things so thoughtfully and so well. So thank you both for joining me today, and thank you to the International Folk Art Market.